Bienvenidos de nuevo. Noticia del Banco Central Europeo, como decíamos, 75 puntos básicos de subida, pocas noticias sobre el quantitative tightening, y sobre todo esto vamos a hablar ahora con Kevin Thozet, que es miembro del Comité de Inversión de Carmignac. Welcome and thank you for having us.
Hello, thank you for receiving me today.
Hello, and how have you received this news, this decision of, this expected decision of rise interest just in 75 basic points?
Yes, well, in fact, 75 basis points hike was widely expected, but what was not expected was, in fact, that the speech of Mrs. Lagarde and the tone of today's meeting was very much on the dovish side. Everybody was expecting a hawkish meeting, but in fact, we got a dovish meeting, despite this 75 basis points hike, which is very significant. Why that is? Because Mrs. Lagarde is saying that, in fact, recession is worse than inflation. And this is a very significant change from the stance that we have had over the past quarter or so.
Well, I think that a common concern now here in the Eurozone is the evolution of the euro. How do you think this decision will affect the evolution of the euro, especially euro-dollar?
Well, yes, I mean, there are different factors which are impacting the evolution of the euro. Interest rates differential is one, and this, all eyes will be on what the Fed will be doing over the coming days and week. Another one is the growth differential between economic growth in the euro area versus the US, and the last one is the term of trade, so more linked to energy. With regards to economic growth, so the growth differential, and what we expect is that recession will be hitting the euro area before the US, so that would be more in favor of the US dollar. And on the interest rates front as well, we have had an hawkish meeting from the ECB, but a dovish meeting from the ECB, but the speech as well could be changing for the Fed in November. Indeed, what we have seen in 2022 was, 2022 was the year of the front loading. Every central bank was rushing to hike short-term interest rates in the face of very violent inflationary shock. And what we are likely going into 2023, it's maybe this will be the year of observation, meaning that central bankers will be more in a wait-and-see type of position, and they will be monitoring the impact of higher interest rates on economies.
Kevin, have you seen Christine Lagarde more pessimistic than in other occasions?
Well, yeah, I mean, clearly she was very much, I would say, concerned on the recession risk, which is again mounting closer and closer in Europe. It's our own expectations at Carmignac is that recession in the euro area could come as soon as Q4 of this year. Some market observer were expecting some news on the balance sheet side, and this the can has been kicked further down the road. Why that is? Because balance sheets and reduction and quantitative tightening is a very complex issue, and there's no simple solution to address it. Why that is? Because of the diversity of purchases, the difference of economic realities between Spain, Italy, France, which are at a very different, I would say, states than that over in the Netherlands, Germany, or Finland. So yes, she has clearly outlined, say, the downside risk to economic growth, and this is what has surprised market participants on the dovish side.
And Kevin, what's your opinion on the issue that fiscal policy, it seems like, is not on the same page like monetary policy? And today, Christine Lagarde has said that states should give these aids for the more vulnerable and just for the more vulnerable. How do you see this, like, non-convergence path of the fiscal and the monetary policy?
Well, yeah, I mean, fiscal support is, I'd say, very well and very strongly needed, and again, notably for those most vulnerable economic actors, for sure. But as we have been reminded over the past weeks and months, fiscal policies and politicians are walking a very fine line, I would say. Everybody has had their eyes focused on what was happening in the UK, for instance, and clearly what we have seen there is that on the one hand, fiscal policy is very well needed, but on the other hand, fiscal profligacy is no longer warranted because, again, fixed income markets can be very severe and can punish very strongly those issuers which are a bit too generous.
And so now in the United States, we are expecting this decision on the 2nd of November from the Federal Reserve. What do you expect from that meeting, taking into account especially the great results of the data of the GDP?
Yeah. Well, there are two things. So, I mean, again, great results on the GDP front, and I will be happy to comment on this a bit later. But those GDP publications are very much, I would say, backward-looking. But I'll come back to this in a second. With regards to what we expect for the next FOMC meeting on the 2nd of November. So, the question is 75 basis points, largely discounted in. That's probably going to happen. But what we could see is similar to what Mrs. Lagarde has been adopting, a more dovish stance. So maybe Mr. Powell will be preparing markets for 50 basis points hikes in December and no longer a 75 basis points hike. I think the main question is what can we expect beyond this, I would say. And in fact, if we're looking at our market expectations for the first half of 2023, the Fed is expected to pause. And then as from the second half of 2023, so when the recession is expected to come in the US, well, there are only three interest rates cuts priced in after this. So, markets are, I'd say, quite well pricing the US macroeconomic environment and the scenario or path going forward. A Fed which is slowing, a slow decline in inflation, but I would say that what potentially market participants are underestimating the number of cuts in interest rates once recession will hit. So potentially, I'd say more value on those US rates. Obviously, the sequence is a tough call, but these would be our expectations. To go back on the second part of your questions with regards to US GDP data, which were published this afternoon. Well, at 2.6% on an annualized path, they were better than expected. What did it show? A resilient consumer, for sure. But, and there's a significant but to this, we saw real estate in free fall and with a very strong decrease in housing investments by both households and for companies as well. And this is clearly a reflection of those higher interest rates. What else have we seen is that companies have also grown their fixed investments into equipments at plus 10% over the quarter. So that's pretty much, I would say, good news, because on the second quarter they were more on the downside. But, and there's a significant but to it, I'd say I take those capital expenditure data with a pinch of salt. Why that is? Because we had capital goods orders published today, and these are contracting as well.
And also in the United States, the job market, we have to see that it's not cooling. Do you think the Fed will increase and especially maintain these high interest rates until the job market, especially job market, is finally affected?
Yes, so that's a very good question. Will the Fed continue until the job on inflation is done? What we are seeing is, increase again, I'd say, political pressure, because with recession risk mounting, there will be more and more pressure on policymakers and monetary policymakers as well to, I'd say, adopt lesser of a strict monetary policy. Clearly, the Federal Reserve, I would say, a victory over inflation will come from the economic recession, clearly, and this will need to come at a cost of a turnaround in employment. Our own estimation, our own calculation at Carmignac is that so as to be able to bring back inflation in the US within the 2% range, the US economy would have to go through a severe recession of -2% in economic growth, so -2% in US GDP. And this will be very challenging to maintain, again, as political pressure are mounting as we move into 2023.
And what do you expect from the Q3 results from Apple and Amazon, that in a few hours we will see them? Are we afraid of what they can say about the development in these last 3 months?
Well, yes, I mean, clearly, and what we have been seeing, and whether it is during this, before with, pre-announcements of the earnings seasons, or most recently, some publications we have seen on the technological sector, and notably with Facebook most recently, is that in fact the earnings trajectory is being questioned these days. And we have seen this on the semiconductor side, for instance. We have seen this with ASML. We are seeing this with Facebook, with I'd say lesser revenue, lesser engagement metrics. As we are entering into a recession, clearly those, I'd say, businesses which are more exposed to the economic cycle, so namely Facebook, some other names like Google, for instance, on the advertising spend, are in a much more, let's say, difficult position than they were before. So it's probably not a very good omen for them. Again, in the very strong sell-off that we have seen this year on equity markets, most of the sell-off has been coming from valuation and contraction in valuation multiples. On the earnings side, markets still needs to kind of do their homework and do their work, and there's potentially more downside on the earnings fronts going forward.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your analysis, for your time, for sharing with us your expertise and your economic outlook. Thank you very much. Hope to see you soon here, presently, in Negocios Televisión. Nice to meet you.
Muchas gracias. Adiós.